On a plane in mid-flight, a passenger suddenly fell ill. The flight attendants urgently looked for a doctor. A man raised his hand and walked toward the patient as everyone watched with hope. He diagnosed the illness as an irregular heartbeat and said the patient just needed to get medical help after landing. But in fact, the man was not a doctor. He was a medical student who had studied for 9 years but failed to pass the licensing exam. Now, he planned to trade his life for insurance money to support his family. Suddenly, the patient's condition got worse. He had heart disease, and it seemed he was suffering from fluid buildup in the heart. An emergency procedure was needed. The man thought for a moment and said he could not operate without an anesthetist and a nurse. To his surprise, one passenger said he was an anesthetist and another claimed to be a nurse. But the truth was, the so-called anesthetist just had a name that sounded similar, and the nurse only played that role when greeting guests. The man then said he had no surgical tools and suggested turning the plane around. At that moment, a hijacker suddenly pulled out a knife and took a flight attendant hostage, demanding the flight continue. But the knife was only a model airplane wing. The hijacker was actually an office worker. He had finally gotten a 4-day vacation and refused to let the trip fail. In fact, the flight attendant was the real ringleader. One of his men quickly called the captain, but the man they thought was the captain had accidentally poisoned the real captain with his cooking. Now, he had no confidence in landing the plane. Then a passenger pointed out that the plane had emergency medical equipment. This made the fake doctor suspicious. That passenger turned out to be a real doctor. But after a failed surgery in the past, he no longer dared to pick up a scalpel. A boy nearby claimed the man was actually an air guitar player. He had made a mistake. The boy shouted for a performance, and the hijacker impatiently demanded it too. The man got ready for the surgery while the patient's wife watched him. In truth, she was just a bystander. The people around her had mistaken her for his wife. The man looked at the clock and announced the time as 1:30. But it was not a clock, it was a temperature and humidity meter. As the fake doctor began the operation, the real doctor awkwardly performed his air guitar show. Someone said his performance was terrible, like a fraud. This made everyone tense, but the little boy clapped and cheered. He said the man was amazing, just like a real air guitar star. In the sound of applause, all the imposters were touched. They decided to play their roles well. Even the temperature meter tried its best to be a clock. The surgery ended. The man was not sure if it had worked. Luckily, the patient not only had heart disease but also pneumothorax, and the surgery had accidentally removed the air from his lungs. The plane landed safely. As the man walked through the airport, he happened to see the robber. People around him shouted for the police. The man turned around. Yes, he could be a police officer too.